Today's soundbite is about telepathy, and I've chosen a piece that was written by a person called Adolfo Guirfa. Please forgive me if I've butchered your name. I will place the link at the bottom for you to look at. It is about telepathy, and I will be reading this piece. These days we could speak of a phenomenon which has occurred in all times and that we could describe under the heading of about the loneliness of sorcerers or warriors, to which the present conditions apparently condemn us, and of the need for communication, participation in a larger tribal and at the same time soul unit, which we see in the numerical series and its desire to return to the original unit, in the collective rites, in the sacred dances, in the covens of those medieval witches, in the urgency of an effective communion between consonant parts. The substitutes that technology offers us are not enough, nor will they be able to satisfy it even from afar. That is why we proceed to describe telepathy. It is interesting to note here that there is an exact similarity with the vesica piscis that appears when two or more circles intersect around a common point, and at which, if we see it three-dimensionally, we will observe the shape of a hive or bees, like those that hang from the branch of a tree, an oblong shape, the same that we see, for example, in a seed, in a fruit, such as an olive, etc., and that we could also make it correspond to the very center of a torus, even to the center of each galaxy, where it is called a black hole, which rather from what is deduced from the above come to be the vital centers or chakras from where new universes can emerge. Telepathy is commonly thought of as the transmission of words. Let us remember that in Egypt there were two languages, the hieroglyphic, that of signs from the sacred area, the demotic, of the people, alphabetical, then the Phoenician alphabet also arises. Perhaps that is why in Greece and Rome oratory was taught to reinforce thoughts with words after man had already lost direct knowledge. And worse yet, that in these days they want to take us to an even lower level, to the level of a monosyllabic alphabet, a binary one, of simply yes and no, of ones and zeros, of an inhuman machine language. That is why the answer is silence, since authentic telepathy is at a much higher level than the words. What better example than a face, two eyes, and an expressive look, full of information and closed and silent lips? As for that transmission of words, this happens in proximity situations, but ordinary thoughts are based mainly on our false mechanical consciousness, focused only on what we call our brain that emits the signals, forgetting that we not only have one of those brains, in addition to the fact that we only use it verbally, verbal version, called by some formative apparatus, when in reality it should and is really the center of our consciousness, in addition to actually we have three main centers. And first of all, we must realize that our brain or brains are nothing but like receivers, transmitters like a radio or television or TV receiver, transmitter like a mobile phone. If they turn off or fail the station, or the field in which they operate does not stop, or doesn't stop existing, we must hear and bear in mind that a very important aspect of this is precisely these thoughts and beliefs, as well as the name as the same discursive knowledge, that one based on the association of words instead of experiences, feelings, and sensations, and that characterizes our time, as Hermann Hesse calls it in his bead game, the brochuresque era. For this reason, we are very clear that telepathy exists without words, permanently and in a parallel to our formal communications, and what it is about is precisely experiences, feelings, and sensations. For this reason, let us trust them and get used to giving them preponderance. We do not require words or immediacy. Our visualizations and immediate knowledge will suffice. Therefore, let us be very clear that telepathy without words exists permanently and parallel to our formal communications, and what it is about is precisely experiences, feelings, and sensations. For this reason, let us trust then and get used to the giving and to giving them preponderance. We do not require words or spatial immediacy. Mutual voluntary visualizations and perceptions is enough. The Arhuaco people, who in the mountains of Colombia have maintained their ancestral customs and values, which Deutsche Welle, which is German television, shows in the report, that the children's eyes are greatly impressed and adults from this town who appear there extremely expressive. This leads us to the certainty that we have or are being conditioned and or self-conditioned by our so-called verbal thoughts to explain or else to name things. A true polynomial. Poly, many, nomia, rules to labels everything, without even passing it through the sieve of reason, without even minimally requiring us to define it and even less perceive it directly. Let us remember but some very recent moment in which we were greeted. We shook someone's hands and they shook it back. We will only realize that in that short period of time there was a very intense and multiple exchange of impressions that we have ignored and worse yet perhaps relegated to oblivion, to the subconscious, labeling, closing, covering, and even sterilizing. Hence the wise statement of the interview, Arhuaco lady, "We have come here to live," simplifies our purpose. We come to experience life, to live it, not to name it, not to label it, and ignore it. We find ourselves, in fact, like fish surrounded by the sea, ignoring the sea, surrounded by an infinity, by the ether, by the totality of force. One way to represent this fact to ourselves is to consider something very simple and of which we must be absolute, convinced, and believe in it, that just as a mirror is a polished surface that by its nature reflects most waves, vibrations in front of it, which would imply a limit between this three-dimensional reality that we validate and an anti-universe or anti-reality, in front of which only because of the education received and false beliefs instilled we suppose ourselves separated. We will understand that such a dichotomy, such a separation does not exist, and therefore we must and can explore with our perceptions, see, feel around. In this regard, Carlos Castaneda's teacher, Don Juan Matus, points him out that the majority of human beings turn out to be like sailing boats whose sails are perforated, and therefore we do not perceive or feel the wind of the forces that are developing around us. We all can and should do it, and in this, through the active imagination, and our dedication and subtle attention should help us, as well as the discovery and practices of the functioning of our various centers, or chakras, or nerve plexuses perfectly defined by anatomy. Thus, there is no difficulty whatsoever for our capacities in this. We have been deceived generation after generation. Both our capacities to know and to be have always been intact. And here the law of Occam's razor applies. Occam's razor's principle of economy or principle of parsimony is a methodological and philosophical principle attributed to the Franciscan friar, philosopher, and scholastic logician William of Ockham, according to whom, other things being equal, the simplest explanation is usually the most probable. Furthermore, when two or more imagine the same thing, it is not imagination but consensus, or coven, or constellation, or constellated groups, or holograms participating in a morphic field. Exercise our round table, morphic field of connection. The idea is to awaken and connect to the centers in the potential state, as when the electrodes in an electrolytic cell or a battery are separated, generating electricity, a power. For this, we will go through with our visual or imaginative attention, representation, and a representative of our centers or chakras to perceive them in common amongst ourselves. And that concludes the portion of the work Telepathy. Please find the attached link to the website to read the rest of the material. Thank you.